Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and this is Jenny's allotment garden. I am once again not at the allotment and just in the back garden instead. And just wanted to give you a bit of an update on what's been happening over the last week. So one of the things that I've been up to this week has been my second set of sowings. I planted most of my things sort of in February and in March, and as you know, I've lost some seedlings and all sorts of other bits and pieces, but this week I did actually manage to get quite a lot of sowing done. So I've sown a second set of beetroot and I'm going effectively like a mixed bag, I've got a mixed seed packet of beetroot, so it's got loads of different varieties in: Bull's Blood, Chioggia, Boltardi, Burpees Golden. So I've sown about 12 of those, and I will hopefully be putting those into the allotment in sort of probably about 5 weeks. I'm hoping that at this point in the year, with it being May, that they should grow a lot faster and I'll be able to put them out a bit quicker too. The first that I grew are actually already in at the allotment, so they got transplanted this week and so far seem to be doing okay. I also started my kales this week, so I plant kales for the autumn and winter harvest, so they're sort of they're for my overwintering beds that are at the small allotment by the park. So they will be going in the space where the broad beans currently are, but they really won't be ready to go out probably until the end of June, maybe the beginning of July. So I've put in 3 different varieties. I'm going Nero di Toscana, which is an Italian sort of dinosaur leaf type kale, which I grew last year. It's really, really tasty, best cooked, but actually, yeah, a really, really good staple, to be honest, and silvers through probably until the very end of February, February 2021. So I was actually really pleased with it. It's really prolific. I did about 6 plants last year, and that worked out really well. I'm probably going to do the same this year. And although that was quite a lot of kale for one family, I'm just going to share it instead, but I still want all 6 plants. And then I'm growing some curly kale, which I really struggled to grow last year. I struggled to get it to germinate, and I didn't have very strong seedlings. I ended up with only 1 plant, but it was really such a shame because I actually really enjoy that kale. So I'm hoping that this year that will turn out a little bit better. So I've also sown 6 of those as well. And then I've sown some red Russian kale. Now, I've not tried red Russian kale before. I might have possibly had it in a salad bag, actually, now that I think about it. But either way, I am growing it for salads, but I will probably also try and have some of the leaves grow a bit bigger so that I can also cook with them as well, and I'll just see how they go. I finally managed to get some of the things out of the greenhouse and into the ground at the allotment by the house at plot 15A. So I've planted out, let me get this right now. I had some potatoes left. I had like 3 potatoes left from the Vivaldi potatoes that I planted at the park. So I've actually just put those in a grow bag at the allotment. I've also put some ochre in a grow bag at the allotment as well. I don't normally plant my ochre out before this time of year. I wait until the last frost has passed, so it should hopefully be fine. I'm hoping to get a much bigger harvest from them this year. Last year was my first year growing them and I didn't get a very big harvest at all, although it is possible that I just dug them up too early, because you really do have to wait for it to get very, very cold, and I was in fact just very, very impatient. So I'm going to try and do better this year. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes. I had also bought some new tubers of ochre that were bigger, because the tubers that I had were really small, which meant that they just created more small tubers, which on the one hand is fine, but they were just too small. So I've bought some bigger ones and I'm hoping that they will produce bigger tubers in and of themselves. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. I put in some kohlrabi, All my broccoli is now out and it's covered with netting. In fact, I saw my first cabbage white butterfly this morning. So yeah, they're here. So it's netted against birds and against butterflies. But I'm probably also going to be using a organic pesticide called Grazers #3, which is for whitefly. So I'll be spraying them regularly with that and hope that that works. And I've interplanted them with some onions. My onions didn't do very well this year. My seedlings didn't at all. But of the few that I do have left, I've put in the same bed with the broccoli. And I put a couple of flowers in as well. And that was just to brighten it up. And then in the bed next to that, I've put in the beetroot that I'd planted back in at the beginning of March. I've planted out spring onions. I actually had loads of spring onions. I'd just kind of forgotten that I'd even planted so many of them, that I'd sown so many of them. So I've just planted them in clumps. And then next to them, I've put in some carrots. Now, I've not had any success with carrots yet, but I'm still hopeful, and I don't have insect mesh to protect them, which is why these ones are planted next to onions, which is supposed to repel the carrot fly, because they're not meant to be able to distinguish between the smell. So I've also, when I've sowed them, tried as best as I can to sort of spread the seed out as much as possible so that I then don't need to thin too much. But I think if I do need to thin, what I'm probably going to do this year that I didn't do last year is, instead of pulling up the tiny carrots, is that I'm probably just going to cut the tops off them in the hope that that releases less of a scent and therefore there's less carrot fly. But, you know, it remains to be seen. We're just going to have to wait and see how that works out. But I am really glad to have finally got something in the ground. I was starting to get that sort of, you know, when you get like a bit itchy and a bit annoyed, because I was just like, every time I felt like I tried to do something, it was raining again or the weather was awful and I couldn't get out. In fairness, this week when I planted, it was still raining loads, and I just sort of waited for the break in the clouds, nipped to the allotment, planted some stuff. When it got really bad, came back home and just did that a couple of times until I had managed to get it all sorted. I have managed to get sown this week my sugar snap peas, Opal Creek. So I chose to keep them inside until they've germinated, and then I'll bring them out and put them in the greenhouse for a week or so. And I'll be hardening them off from the greenhouse and outside. Yeah, I opted against direct sowing just because of rodents, really. That's the only reason. But I'm hoping that they will all come up. I did soak them first, so I'm hoping that that will help them to germinate a little bit quicker. And obviously, as it is quite a bit warmer, that should work out quite well too. So I've had mixed results with tomatoes. I was growing 2 different varieties this year, Latta, which is a really early tomato, and Groshovka, which is a slightly later tomato. They are both bush varieties, which I did on purpose because I didn't want to have to fight with an indeterminate cordon tomato and have to keep checking on them every 2 minutes and pulling off the suckers and all of that. I can't, honestly, I couldn't really be bothered. I'm all for lazy gardening, so quite happy not to do that. But my latter early tomatoes, I'm not really sure what happened to them, but they've obviously got some sort of a virus. Their leaves have gone really purple, which I did think might be because they weren't warm enough, because we have had quite a cold snap, although they have been indoors, and their leaves have started curling under and drying out, even though the soil hasn't dried out at all, but the leaves have, and they're just sort of falling off. It started flowering already. It's obviously it's an early tomato, but even for an early tomato, this is still too early, and it's just too small. It's not growing anymore. It's stopped putting on any new growth other than making a trust for flowers and fruit. So I think what I'm probably going to do is just sort of count those as a loss, to be honest. But my Groshovka tomatoes seem to be doing brilliantly. So this week I have moved them from the house into the little greenhouse in the back garden, and I'm going to start hardening them off in order to get them out into the beds at the allotment in the next 10 days or so. They will need quite a bit of room, so I might end up using, I think, more than one. I've got 5 tomatoes, but I expect I'll end up using more than one bed for them, because they need like a minimum of sort of like 2 feet between them, because they grow quite big and sprawling. I want to make sure that they have enough room to be able to grow well and to produce well. So I'm probably going to end up taking up 2 beds to do that, and I'll have to have a little bit of a think about what I can plant in with them other than French marigolds. I don't have any actually, but I may yet pick some up, because I actually think that might be quite a good option, because I am growing them outside. Now, obviously, well, maybe not obviously actually, if you're growing tomatoes outside, then there is a much stronger possibility of them getting blight much later in the season, when the weather starts to get wetter again. End of August, beginning of September, maybe end of September in fairness here, when it starts to rain again. So both of the varieties I've picked should fruit much earlier than that. They should be fruiting in August. So the idea is that I would then get a really good amount of tomatoes from them, but I'm just going to have to wait and see how that goes. So the last thing that I've been up to is sowing my squashes, finally. So I've sown, I've only sown 2 types of courgettes, and I'm only growing 2 of each plant. So I've got courgette all green bush, which is just like it's just a normal courgette, like the one that you'd buy in the supermarket, and a custard white patty pan squash. I've not actually tried patty pan squash before, but I'm just going to grow 2 of each of those plants, because courgettes tend to be incredibly prolific, and although there are loads of things you can do with them, I don't actually want to be eating courgette so much that I begin to hate it. So I'm going to try and reduce the number. So I've planted 2 seeds per pot for those. And the hope is that obviously I will just keep the stronger seedling. If I end up with like all my seedlings come up and they're all doing really well, I will just repot them on and gift them to somebody else at the allotment or to a neighbour or something, because courgettes are really easy to grow and, and quite tasty too. Although my children really sort of disagree with that, but yeah, they'll get over it. I'm hoping they'll enjoy the patty pan squash, because at least it looks different, and I'm not going to tell them that it's related to a courgette before I serve it. We'll see how it works out. The other squash that I am doing again this year is a cheeky curry, the small orange onion squashes. We really love this squash, and I didn't buy new seeds because I had some left from last year, but as it turned out I actually only had 6, so I've planted those 2 to a pot as well, and the aim being that 3 should be enough, and I think they will be, because I'm growing a different winter squash as well. I only had 3 plants last year. I can't remember how many squash that I got from each of them, but probably 3 or 4 at least from each plant, and they actually saw us through really well over winter. They lasted until about the end of January, and then at that point I think I only had maybe 2 left, and they had like a few soft spots, so I just cooked those up quickly. If I'd have thought about it earlier, to be honest, what I would have done is just chopped them up and frozen them, which also would have worked fine. I didn't think of it at the time, but this year if I end up with a lot of squash, that is what I will probably do. But because those squash are small, they're really good for, they're good for loads of things. We tend to have them in a vegetable curry or added to stews, anything like that. Then a supplement for white potatoes as well. Just because they're an easy supplement, and actually one of my kids much prefers squash to potatoes, and so would happily swap them for every meal. You can mash them, you can fry them, you can bake them. There's so much you can do with squash. So I think it's slightly sweeter. Those little onion ones have a slight nutty flavour as well, but they're really tasty. So yeah, going to hopefully have 3 sturdy plants of those. And then finally, I'm growing Crown Prince, which I've not grown before, but since everybody goes on about it being the most amazing squash ever, I figured I'd give it a go. So I think I only got maybe 8 seeds in the packet, which, squashes have a lot of seeds, don't they? And actually, Crown Prince seeds are quite expensive, so I was a little bit put out really. So I'm trying to do 4 of those. and we will see how it goes. I've got enough room for all of those squashes, and I just figured if I was going to grow them, I'm going to try and grow enough so that I can create a little bit of stored food for the winter if all goes well. So yeah, that's what I've been up to this week at the plot. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. Please do, if you enjoyed it, push that thumbs up button and do subscribe if you haven't done already, and I will be back next week to show you the transformation of the plot by the house now that I've cleared the tarpaulin and started some new no dig beds. So I will see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.